At some point today, probably around 2 in the afternoon, your body tried to tell you something. Your focus started slipping. Your eyes got heavy. Your brain quietly put in a request for a nap. And you ignored it. Because you're an adult. Adults don't nap. That belief is so deeply embedded in most cultures that people feel genuinely embarrassed admitting they napped, like it's a character flaw, a sign of laziness, weakness, or a complete lack of discipline. Here's the problem with that. NASA ran a formal study on napping. The United States military has official nap protocols built into operational planning. Elite athletes schedule naps as deliberately as they schedule training sessions. And when researchers put naps head-to-head against caffeine in controlled trials, naps won, not by a little, for memory, learning, and cognitive performance. So the question isn't really whether naps have benefits. The question is why so many people are doing them wrong, why so many people feel terrible after them, and what the science actually says about using them correctly. Because done right, a nap isn't laziness. It's one of the most efficient performance tools available to you, and it's completely free. Let's get into it.
Why your body does this at 2 in the afternoon.
First, it helps to understand why that afternoon slump happens in the first place. Because a lot of people assume it's about what they ate, or how much they slept last night, or just being generally tired. And while those things can make it worse, the dip itself is not optional. It is a biological event. Your brain manages alertness through two overlapping systems. One is adenosine, a chemical that accumulates steadily throughout the day the longer you're awake, building sleep pressure like a slow-filling tank. The other is your circadian rhythm, your internal 24-hour clock, which has its own built-in dip in alertness in the early to mid-afternoon. These two systems converge around 1 to 3 p.m. to create a window where both adenosine pressure and circadian drive are simultaneously pushing toward rest. Your core body temperature also dips slightly at this time, which is one of the same physiological signals that initiates nighttime sleep. This isn't a modern problem created by office environments and heavy lunches. It's a biological feature. Many traditional cultures built daytime rest into their schedules around this very window. The body was designed with a two-peak alertness pattern, a morning period of high function and an evening period of high function, with a valley in between. When you white-knuckle through that valley with extra coffee and willpower, you're fighting the current. When you work with it, even briefly, you recover something your brain actually needed. And the research on what that recovery produces is striking.
What a short nap actually does to your brain.
When you take a short nap, in the range of 15 to 30 minutes, you primarily enter what's called light non-REM sleep, specifically stages 1 and 2. These stages might sound less impressive than deep sleep, but they produce something remarkably specific. They give your brain an opportunity to consolidate and reorganize information, discharge accumulated adenosine, and reset the neural pathways that support attention and performance. Memory is one of the clearest beneficiaries. Naps facilitate the transfer of information from the hippocampus, the brain's short-term holding area, into longer-term neocortical storage. The same process that happens during overnight sleep also happens, in a compressed form, during a nap. Studies show that napping after learning something new helps bake in that information more effectively than staying awake does. Declarative memory, facts and events, improves. Procedural memory, motor skills, learned sequences, improves. Even perceptual memory improves.
One particular study found that older adults who napped for 30 to 90 minutes performed measurably better on word recall and figure drawing, two markers of cognitive function, compared to those who didn't nap. Not a small improvement, a clinically meaningful one. But the benefits extend far beyond memory. The numbers behind napping. NASA conducted a landmark study on pilots taking naps of roughly 20 to 26 minutes during controlled rest periods. The results were specific enough to become foundational in sleep science. Alertness improved by 54% and performance improved by 34% compared to the non-napping control group. 54% alertness improvement from a 26-minute nap. To put that in context, that's not a marginal boost. That's the difference between a pilot who misses an instrument reading and one who catches it. That's the difference between an employee who makes an error in the afternoon and one who doesn't. That's the difference between a surgeon whose focus is fading and one who is fully present in the final hour of a procedure. Studies in other high-performance contexts show consistent findings. Athletes who nap between training sessions show improved sprint times, better reaction speeds, and reduced perceived effort during exercise. People in cognitively demanding jobs show better accuracy, faster processing, and improved consistency on repetitive tasks after short naps. Mood is part of this picture too. Napping reduces negative affect, the emotional residue of frustration, stress, and low energy. Cortisol levels drop. Emotional regulation improves. That particular effect of feeling genuinely less irritated and more even-keeled after a nap isn't just subjective, it's measurable hormonal change. And the cardiovascular research adds another layer. Studies have found that naps of 45 to 60 minutes are associated with lower blood pressure following psychological stress, suggesting that the parasympathetic restoration that happens during naps has downstream effects on the cardiovascular system. Occasional, well-timed napping has been linked to meaningfully lower cardiovascular disease risk in some studies. Naps versus caffeine, what the research found. This one catches most people off guard. When researchers directly compared naps, caffeine, and placebo across multiple cognitive and memory tasks, naps outperformed caffeine on verbal memory, motor learning, and perceptual tasks, not by a trivial margin, consistently. The reason has to do with what caffeine actually does and doesn't do. Caffeine blocks adenosine receptors, which means it prevents you from feeling the sleep pressure that's accumulated. But it doesn't actually clear the adenosine. That pressure is still building behind the scenes while the caffeine is running interference. When caffeine wears off, you get hit with a wall of accumulated adenosine all at once. The crash isn't a side effect, it's the bill coming due. A nap, by contrast, actually clears some of that adenosine during the sleep itself. You wake up from a short nap with genuinely lower sleep pressure, not masked pressure, but reduced pressure, which is why the recovery from a nap tends to be cleaner and longer lasting than the recovery from caffeine. But here's the interesting part. Caffeine and napping aren't mutually exclusive. They're actually synergistic, and researchers have studied this combination specifically. The Nappuccino, science's best afternoon hack. The concept is called a caffeine nap, sometimes called a nappuccino, and it's one of the more counterintuitive but genuinely well-supported performance strategies in sleep science. Here's the mechanism. Caffeine takes approximately 15 to 20 minutes to clear the gut and reach the bloodstream. It peaks around 30 to 60 minutes after ingestion. So if you consume roughly 200 milligrams of caffeine, about 1 to 2 cups of coffee, immediately before lying down for a 20-minute nap, the caffeine doesn't actually reach your brain in meaningful concentration until you're already waking up. During the nap, your brain clears some adenosine naturally. Then, when the caffeine kicks in, it blocks the remaining adenosine receptors, but there's now less adenosine to block. The two mechanisms compound. You wake up from the nap and the caffeine is just beginning to take effect. The result is faster, cleaner, more sustained alertness than either method alone, and significantly reduced sleep inertia. Multiple studies on driving performance, night shift work, and cognitive tasks confirm that the caffeine-nap combination outperforms caffeine alone or napping alone for alertness, reaction time, and error reduction. The protocol is simple. Finish your coffee, set your alarm for 20 to 25 minutes, lie down in a dark, quiet space, and let both mechanisms work simultaneously. Most people who try this properly report it as notably more effective than their usual afternoon coffee. One practical note: this strategy works best in the early afternoon, around 1 to 3 p.m., not later. And it's most useful when needed occasionally for demanding days rather than as a daily crutch.
Why some people wake up feeling awful.
Here's the piece of nap science that almost nobody talks about clearly, and it explains why so many people swear naps don't work for them. It's called sleep inertia, and it's not random grogginess. It's a specific biological state. When you wake from deep sleep, the slow wave stage that typically begins around 20 to 30 minutes into sleep, your brain hasn't finished what it started. The prefrontal cortex, which handles executive function, decision-making, and attention, is among the last regions to fully reactivate. Residual delta brainwaves are still present. Adenosine hasn't cleared cleanly. Cerebral blood flow is still adjusting. The result is a state of genuine cognitive impairment, disorientation, foggy thinking, slowed reaction time, and almost physical resistance to wakefulness that can last anywhere from 15 minutes to over an hour. This is why a 90-minute afternoon nap can feel like waking up in the wrong century. And this is also why the duration of a nap matters so much. If you keep a nap under 25 to 30 minutes, most people don't reach deep, slow-wave sleep at all. They stay in the lighter stage 1 and stage 2 territory, which delivers most of the alertness, memory, and mood benefits, and wake up without meaningful inertia. But here's the thing. People who wake up groggy from naps almost always conclude that napping doesn't work for them, when the reality is that they were napping too long. The nap was working, it just took them too deep. Shorten the nap, and for most people, the grogginess disappears entirely. A few other factors make sleep inertia worse. Sleep debt. If you're significantly behind on overall sleep, you'll enter deep sleep faster and more intensely, even during a short nap. Sleep apnea, which we'll come back to, can cause a similar outcome. And circadian timing matters too. A nap taken at the wrong time of day, particularly in the late afternoon or early evening, is more likely to pull you into heavier sleep stages.
The food crash masquerading as a nap.
There's another reason people feel desperate for sleep around 2 p.m. that has nothing to do with their circadian rhythm, and it's entirely avoidable. When you eat a high glycemic lunch, processed foods, refined carbohydrates, sugary drinks, anything that spikes blood sugar rapidly, your pancreas releases a surge of insulin to manage the glucose load. Blood sugar peaks and then crashes, often dropping below baseline in what's called reactive hypoglycemia. Energy drops sharply, focus disappears. The fatigue that follows can feel indistinguishable from a sleep need.
Simultaneously, high carbohydrate meals increase tryptophan crossing the blood-brain barrier, which converts to serotonin and then melatonin, the sleep hormone. Fast food doesn't just make you tired through vague heaviness. It is biochemically pushing your brain toward sleep through specific hormonal pathways. The result is a crash that layers on top of the natural circadian dip, turning a mild afternoon slump into something that feels like an emergency. Research comparing processed meals to balanced whole food meals of similar calorie content found that processed meals reduce the metabolic boost of digestion by nearly 50%, meaning the body generated almost half as much post-meal energy. Truck drivers eating Western-style fast food reported significantly more post-meal sleepiness than those eating vegetable and healthy fat-based meals. The practical implication is direct. If you're someone who consistently hits a wall at 2 in the afternoon and feels like you need a nap, spend 2 weeks eating balanced whole food lunches, protein, fiber, vegetables, healthy fats, moderate complex carbohydrates, and track what happens to that crash. Many people find it reduces dramatically or disappears, independent of their nap habits.
This doesn't mean the circadian dip goes away. It means you stop amplifying a natural, manageable dip into a functional crisis. How long should a nap actually be? The research is fairly consistent on this, and it maps to different outcomes depending on what you're trying to accomplish. 10 to 20 minutes is the sweet spot for pure alertness recovery. This duration stays comfortably in light sleep stages, clears enough adenosine to noticeably reduce fatigue, and carries virtually no sleep inertia risk for most people. The NASA study, for reference, landed in this territory. 26 minutes was enough to produce those 54% alertness gains. 20 to 30 minutes expands the benefits slightly, more memory consolidation, stronger mood improvement, while still staying within the light sleep range for most people. This is the duration most consistently recommended across sources like the Mayo Clinic, the American Heart Association, and sleep researchers. It's the reliable, everyday nap. 60 to 90 minutes is a different category entirely. At this duration, you're likely completing a full sleep cycle, passing through light sleep into deep, slow-wave sleep and potentially reaching REM. This is where some of the more complex cognitive benefits appear: relational memory, creative insight, and the kind of deeper restoration that can meaningfully reduce a sleep debt. REM sleep in particular supports the associative thinking that underlies creativity, connecting ideas that the waking brain might not have linked. But this duration comes with trade-offs. Sleep inertia risk is substantially higher. Expect up to an hour of grogginess afterward if you wake from slow-wave sleep. And it genuinely begins to eat into nighttime sleep pressure. A 90-minute nap in the early afternoon will probably reduce your ability to fall asleep at your normal time. The general guidance: for daily performance optimization, stay in the 10 to 30-minute range. For deliberate recovery after a genuinely poor night or during a particularly high-demand period, a well-timed 60 to 90-minute nap offers more, but plan your evening accordingly.
The long nap question: what the health data actually shows.
Here's where it gets more nuanced, and where a lot of popular health articles either oversimplify or cause unnecessary alarm. Several large observational studies have found associations between long or frequent napping, typically defined as more than an hour a day, and elevated risks of things like hypertension, cardiovascular disease, metabolic issues, and even all-cause mortality. Those findings are real, but they require context. The key concept here is reverse causation. If you are napping for 90 minutes every single day, the most likely explanation is not that napping is destroying your health. It's that an underlying condition, undiagnosed sleep apnea, poor nighttime sleep quality, early cardiovascular disease, metabolic dysfunction, or an unrelated illness, is causing excessive daytime sleepiness, which is causing the extended napping. The napping is a symptom, not a cause.
This is supported by studies that attempt to control for pre-existing health conditions. When confounders are accounted for, short naps 1 to 2 times per week, 20 to 30 minutes, show neutral to protective associations with cardiovascular health. One study found occasional short napping was associated with a roughly 48% lower cardiovascular disease risk compared to non-nappers. So the picture is this: short, strategic, occasional napping is at worst neutral and at best meaningfully beneficial. Long, frequent napping that feels compulsive or unrefreshing, that's a signal worth paying attention to. Not because napping is harmful, but because it may be pointing to something that needs addressing. And there's one specific condition worth naming directly: sleep apnea, the nap red flag. If you regularly feel the need to nap, not just enjoy a nap, but feel pulled towards sleep despite adequate time in bed the night before, and especially if you snore, have been told you stop breathing during sleep,
or wake up unrefreshed after 7 or 8 hours, get evaluated for obstructive sleep apnea before assuming the napping itself is the problem. Sleep apnea repeatedly interrupts deep restorative sleep throughout the night through partial or complete airway collapses, sometimes hundreds of times, preventing the deep, slow-wave sleep your body needs. The result is that you technically sleep for 8 hours and wake up more tired than when you went to bed. The excessive daytime sleepiness is the body trying to recover the deep sleep it didn't get overnight. No nap protocol in the world will resolve that. No amount of power naps will compensate for fragmented overnight sleep caused by a structural airway issue. The fix requires addressing the actual cause. If you've tried short naps and they consistently leave you feeling worse, or if you find you need naps daily just to function, that pattern is worth investigating medically. For most healthy adults, a well-timed short nap produces the benefits described in this video. If that isn't your experience, the question worth asking is why. Who should actually avoid napping? Napping isn't universally beneficial. There's one specific population for whom napping, particularly regular napping, is generally counterproductive: people actively dealing with chronic insomnia. If falling asleep or staying asleep at night is already a struggle, napping during the day reduces the adenosine pressure that your body needs to accumulate for nighttime sleep. You end up at 10 p.m. with less sleep hunger, lighter sleep, and more opportunities for the anxiety and frustration that perpetuates insomnia to take hold. The first-line clinical treatment for chronic insomnia, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBT-I, typically restricts daytime napping deliberately for this reason. The short-term discomfort of pushing through the afternoon is part of rebuilding a strong, reliable sleep drive that makes nighttime sleep deeper and more consolidated. If nighttime sleep is working well, napping is almost certainly safe and often beneficial. If nighttime sleep is a consistent struggle, the naps may be making it harder, even if they feel helpful in the moment. The practical protocol. Given everything the research shows, here's what a sensible napping approach actually looks like. Timing first. The early to mid-afternoon, somewhere between 1 and 3 p.m., aligns with the natural circadian dip and minimizes interference with melatonin onset later in the evening. This is the window where napping works with your biology rather than against it. Napping after 3 or 4 in the afternoon increasingly pushes nighttime sleep onset later. Duration. Set an alarm for 20 to 25 minutes. This is enough to move through light sleep and clear adenosine, while virtually eliminating sleep inertia risk. If you're using a caffeine nap, drink your coffee or espresso right before lying down, set the alarm for the same 20 to 25 minutes, and let the timing do its work. Environment. Dark, cool, and quiet remains the setup that allows your nervous system to actually settle. An eye mask in a bright room, earplugs, or white noise if noise is a factor. You don't need to fall deeply asleep to benefit. Even a period of relaxed, eyes-closed rest has measurable restorative effects on attention and mood. After the nap. Give yourself 5 to 10 minutes before demanding anything cognitively significant. Drink some water. Move around briefly. If you use the caffeine nap strategy, the caffeine should be peaking right around this time, which is why most people who use it report feeling alert and focused within minutes of waking, rather than sluggish. Frequency. 1 to 3 times a week for most healthy adults seems to be the sweet spot. Regular enough to benefit from the practice, infrequent enough to not meaningfully interfere with nighttime sleep pressure. If you find yourself needing a nap every single day and still feeling tired, revisit the nighttime sleep quality question. The brain health angle. One last piece of evidence worth noting, particularly for anyone thinking about long-term cognitive health. Research looking at habitual moderate napping and brain volume found that people who napped regularly showed greater total brain volume compared to non-nappers. The difference equivalent to approximately 2.5 to 6.5 years of slower brain aging. This is an observational finding, so it doesn't prove causation, but it adds to the picture that strategic napping isn't just an immediate performance tool. It may be part of a longer-term pattern of brain maintenance. The mechanism likely involves the deep sleep functions we've already discussed: memory consolidation, the clearance of metabolic waste from the brain's cleaning system, and the restoration of neural circuits that support learning and emotional regulation. A brain that gets periodic midday restoration is, in the long run, a brain that's being better maintained. The afternoon slump is not your enemy. It's a biological feature, and it comes with a built-in solution that humans used for most of our history before the modern workday decided it was lazy. What the science actually shows is that a short, well-timed nap, 20 to 25 minutes in the early afternoon in a dark, quiet space, can recover a meaningful portion of the alertness, memory, mood, and performance that the day has spent down. It beats caffeine alone on most cognitive measures. It lowers stress hormones. It supports heart health. And when the caffeine nap strategy is used, it eliminates the main downside people associate with napping in the first place. The tool works. The only thing that needed fixing was how most people were using it. If this kind of content, real science, explained clearly with practical takeaways you can actually use, is what you're looking for, subscribe and stay around. There's a lot more of it coming.